West Asia region thrown into chaos. Military adventurism with the goal of stealing land from Muslim countries and creating discord and divisions. The Israeli regime aggression continues. The exploitation of a crisis in another country may have short-term results, but it will work against the Israeli regime if Syria works towards stability. Meanwhile, another war front can only mean economic deterioration for Israeli themselves at the behest of military manufacturers. Israelis thought that they would have a break from the ongoing wars when Israel signed a truce deal with Lebanon. They hoped that it would spill over to the Gaza onslaught and secure maybe a ceasefire deal there. Little did they know, not only would that not happen, but the war was expanded actually into Syria. This is while their economy continued to tank. The headlines we're going to be looking at in this edition of the program: 1.5% GDP growth is a reduction that has happened because of the wars from the Israeli regime's economy. 0% for 2024 is prediction for the year coming to an end. Not obviously something to be proud of. Now, the war costs at this point have cost the economy 10%. That is quite high. 4% was the norm from the years 20 to 2023, but now 10% is what it's registered at. And the impact, well, perhaps the officials in the Israeli regime didn't anticipate having the second highest poverty rate in the OECD. That's right, nothing to be proud of when you take a look at how they boasted about how much money they were accumulating, for example, through their tech sector. Well, to discuss some of those highlights and a lot more are our guests. We have investigative journalist John Vedmore, who will be talking about that. Also, Imran Mukaddam, who's the CEO at Inspire Media Network, will join us in this edition of the program.
Thank you for having me. Well, Israel doesn't have to cope with being able to pay for this war because other people are paying for the war. It's a proxy war. Israel is really a proxy of the West, and the West is continuing to fund Israel to a large degree. This war isn't going to mean that Israel will go bust at any time. It doesn't mean that Israel won't be able to afford this war. This war is a war that comes from the West, it comes from Europe, it comes from Britain, it comes from America, it comes from the CIA. If the West was not putting in billions and billions, if not over the entire time, with inflation taken into account, trillions, then Israel would not be able to afford to fight its neighbors.
Let's get some support behind some of the things that our guests there said and expand more why Israel is experiencing an economic crisis. We're going to take a look at the economic shocks. Actually, 90% of the economic shocks that Israel is experiencing comes from indirect factors. Things such as reduced investment, for example, or we're taking a look at slowing productivity, growth, and also labor market disruption. Now, according to the Bank of Israel, Israel's war-related costs from the years 2023 up to 2025, well, that could amount to be a staggering $60 billion. And some estimates are actually putting that at $100 billion, thereby costing Israel 10% of its economy.
they won't be allowed to go fully bankrupt. They won't be allowed to fail in a way that would affect the war. The nations are bolstering the Israeli economy. Nations like America and Britain are going to be pushing to make sure that Israel doesn't feel the impact. This is one of the biggest weaknesses of Israel, is the fact that it's got a very long coastline, and the sanctions will have some form of effect. They're pushing towards Greater Israel, and that means that there will need to be some control of the sea routes. If it gets too bad for Israel, then you will see big Western battleships and destroyers deployed to the region.
Time now to take a look at some social media posts. A warning that was issued to the Prime Minister, a topic that we will be covering in our in-depth section, but here at a different angle. 130 top Israeli economists issued this warning where Israel is spiraling toward collapse. With soaring debt, fleeing investments, global boycotts hitting the Israeli regime hard, the cracks in the apartheid regime are growing. Next, Israel's economy is falling apart due to their actions. 28% of Israelis live below the poverty line. Then, lecturer in political economy of the Middle East, Dr. Sai Englert explores the underlying causes of Israel's prolonged violence against Palestinians, highlighting its role in the ongoing genocide in Gaza.
I say this to my students. I say, you want to know what the Nakba is, you want to know what settler colonial campaigns of genocide are.
Look what happens to Gaza.
Yeah, you're seeing it right now. This is what it means to destroy a people. What we're seeing is the amount of organization, energy, destruction, murder that it takes to disappear a people, to push a people out of their land. It doesn't just happen in war. This is what it looks like, and what it's looked like for the last 500 years of colonial expansion, violence, and murder.
Obviously, it's costing a lot more than the $66 billion in lost revenue and economy. It's costing them in human capital. It's costing them in production viability of a lot of the products. It's costing them in the agricultural sector. This war has come at a great cost to Israel, but they have deep pockets because they have backers with that can print money at whim. So with the US dollar as the banker, they can carry on with as much destruction as they want because they have the backing of the West and they have the backing of the United States.
One of the most outstanding expenditures for the Cabinet of Israel when drawing up the budget is allocating funds. And it turns out that that is the biggest expenditure when you take a look at that. That is social welfare. And the figure is astounding, $57 billion. In terms of that, this is what we're looking at. And that is something that obviously puts a strain on the Israeli budget.
All the world bankers investing in this war so that they can make profits from the military-industrial complex. This war has in fact been an investment in Israel and the greater Middle East, and the more destruction and the more chaos they can accrue, the greater return on investment for the industrial military complex. Israel has calculated the cost, but it's definitely real, and it has made living in Israel quite a difficult prospect, and that's why many of the citizens with dual citizenship is leaving the country.
This is the Info News section of the program. First up, we can take a look at Europe's economic crisis. And basically, two countries are at fault here, if you want to label it as such, and that's Germany and France. They are in crisis mode, and the next global financial crash now is being questioned whether it's brewing or not. Some are worried about this gripping the EU. The euro's failure to deliver has had significant consequences. Now, the EU is in our next topic, but on a threat leveled by the incoming U.S. President Donald Trump, who has threatened tariffs if the EU does not buy more oil and gas from the U.S. The EU spokesman says that 27-nation bloc, which already buys most U.S. oil and gas exports, is open to talks with President-elect. Now, Trump has said that they must make up the tremendous deficit with the U.S. by the large-scale purchase of our oil and gas. Let's check out what tariffs means, a definition check for those that are not sure what it means in Trump's terms. Well, the textbook definition is a tax imposed by the government on imports or the exports of goods. The bad news for Trump, most, if not all, economists have concluded that tariffs will bring inflation to the U.S., but that is not something that Trump wants to hear. Well, if this topic is something that you're interested in, let us know. Maybe we could do a program on it. Contact info is below me. Next up, U.S. poverty during Christmas time. That is something that happens every Christmas. In fact, some figures come out, and this Christmas is no exception. Many are starving, few are smiling. In 2023, 97% of households reported not having enough money to buy food when groceries ran out. 68% reported that they were hungry, but they didn't eat because they could not afford to. Well, that does it for our Info News section. If you enjoy the topics, or if you have a topic from wherever you are with an economic flavor, do send them to us. Contact information is coming up. It's time now for the in-depth section of the program. Israel's economic downturn has been ongoing for quite some time, and it has chipped away at every sector of its fragile economy. If it weren't for a variety of factors, especially the assistance to Israelis, there would be massive social unrest. Now, as I mentioned, the impact on economic sectors is massive, and this is because there are major ones that have been impacted. The Israeli tourism, minus 75%, construction, minus 14%, and take a look at agriculture, minus 30%, a whole range of industries also as a result, like the hotel and service sector, based on the way that hospitality has been affected, has created the contagion of negative effects, and we can see that. Now we move on to what has been a warning, and you don't need to take our word for it. 130 economists have issued this warning. Israel's economy and Israel's society is actually falling into a spiral of collapse. That's 130 economists that have issued this warning to the Prime Minister Netanyahu. In short, Israel's economy and society is really bearing the brunt of the wars that the Israeli regime continues to exercise. Let's bring back our guests and see what they think about this. Rejoining us is Johnny Vedmore, who's an investigative journalist. Johnny Vedmore, welcome back. Let's take a look at Israel's inflation. It's at the highest level compared to most Western countries. We're taking a look at a recession that's been ongoing, even though some are denying that inside of Israel. You have foreign investors that distrust what's going on in terms of the instability at a minimum, adding to the debt. Tell us what the future of the Israeli regime looks like. Can it crawl out of this economic crisis?
There's a big change happening in the world at the moment, a very big change, one that is a lot of people are not seeing coming, and that is a financial change. They want to change the West, especially, and the East. The BRICS countries are the same. They want to create things like CBDCs. They want to create a new form of currency exchange. And since the petrodollar got axed this year, we're likely to see the push towards that. And for that to happen, there needs to be an economic crisis. There needs to be economic collapse so that they can come in, problem, reaction, solution, and they can give the solution to all of the countries who are Western aligned or Western supporting. I think there's not going to be just an economic crisis in Israel over the next year. We're going to see economic crisis all over the world, and they are staged, manufactured, meant to be so that they can, the West can hold power, financial power over the rest of the world. Israel will not be allowed to go bankrupt. It will be in the same situation as every other country that is within the economic markets now. They're changing. Computerization, digitalization is happening, and the future of Israel's economy is going to be secure whatever happens. Whether that change happens overnight or whether it happens in 5-10 years' time, it makes no difference. Israel will not be allowed to go bankrupt by the West. Israel is possibly one of the most important conduits for Western power now. There is no place on earth that the West wants to keep control of the most, because it allows for the destabilization of the entire Middle East, and it allows for them to be able to continue accessing the natural resources which are so abundant in places in the Middle East.
Well, let's take a look at some other indicators pointing to Israel's economic dissipation. For example, Israel is drowning in debt. That's the number one issue. $340 billion is the latest figure. That marks a 20% increase since the year 2022, and it's one of many factors which reflects itself in the GDP, which, as we see over here, for the year 2024, it was 1%. They're even saying that it could be 0%. That's right, no growth, and then at best, a 1% growth. Now we take a look at a society at breaking point, which I've mentioned when I've discussed every facet of this section, in the in-depth section that we have. You're having skilled workers that are departing the occupied lands. You have a tax burden that's accelerating the migration. And when you take a look at the figure for 2024 in terms of the number of Israelis that have migrated out of the occupied land, well, that figure, 40,600, is what was registered, and that could be a lot more based on some other estimates. Let's get an idea more from our other guest rejoining us, Imran Muqaddam, who's the CEO over at Inspire Media Network. Imran Muqaddam, welcome back to Economic Divide. Israel's inflation is what I'd like to zoom in on, because at this point that's creeping up. You have a massive debt burden that we just discussed, and you're looking at a GDP growth that is maybe going to register by the year out, which is in a matter of days, at 0%. Do you think that Israel is going to climb out of this economic crisis that it finds itself in?
Like I said in the beginning, Israel has deep pockets, and they have the backing of America and the West, and especially under Donald Trump, the amount of arms that has been given to Israel, they can double that amount in economic support to rebuild the Israeli economy. So for them, the cost right now of the war is an investment. It's worth the cost, because they will be getting 10 times the cost back in economic investment from their backers, because they control the American House of Congress, they control the Senate, they control the new President Trump. So they know that they have the financial wherewithal to continue doing what they're doing. Mind you, the cost for South Africa, speaking from Cape Town, is that we are receiving a lot of let's call it Israeli refugees coming into Cape Town and resettling here because they have South African citizenship. So we're seeing an influx of Israeli refugees into Cape Town through through Cape Town Airport. And so the impact for South Africa is as worrying in terms of that we will see a huge Israeli and Zionist presence in Cape Town. And we're seeing that increasing at the moment. So yes, there is a flight of human capital out of Israel. So yes, there is devastating impact, but once they've achieved the objectives, and that we hope will never happen, they will reinvest and recoup their losses.
Hello, and welcome to the Quick Tech section. I'm Kiarash Pournamati. If there was a real sign of what poor shape Israel is in economically, it is its poverty rate. A recent report has come out revealing how badly Israelis are doing these days in the land they're occupying. According to a new report from the National Insurance Institute, Israel's poverty rate is among the highest in developed nations, second only to Costa Rica. Nearly 2 million Israelis, representing 20% of the population, live below the poverty line. Looking at the impact of poverty on Israeli society, one sector that has been affected are children, who are suffering the brunt of this economic crisis. According to the report, children comprise 44% of all poor people, even though their proportion in the population is 32.5%. Geographically, the highest concentrations of poverty were in Al-Quds, where 36.2% of families were classified as poor, followed by the occupied land's northern and southern regions, with poverty rates of 22.5% and 22.6% respectively. All of this should probably raise the alarm bells for Israeli officials, especially the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but that has not happened. In fact, this poverty rate is a lot worse than what has been reported, something Israeli officials don't want the world to know. You see, without assistance programs, the poverty rate would have reached 31.1% instead of the current 20% of the population. There was a 15.2% increase in assistance payments last year. And that does it for this edition of Quick Tech section. I hope you found it to be useful. If you have any comments or questions, contact information is coming right up. I'm Kiarash, and I'll see you next week.